Submission, faith, and patience, you conveyed the noble message, brought us light through your guidance. Peace be upon you, my beloved.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wasallam ala khatam al-anbiya'i wa mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. My beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we continue in our understanding of the Seerah, the understanding of the biography and life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we recognize that this life and what surrounds it sets the stage for not only the history of the Arabian Peninsula, but it sets the stage for many parts of the world. And I would dare to say that even the knowledge of the Seerah, and especially what we are about to cover tonight, has extreme importance for those who are studying the political situation in the Middle East, in the Muslim world, which of course is affecting the whole of the planet today. And the basis of this comes from the concept of Jahiliyyah. Now we saw that Jahiliyyah in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Arabian Peninsula, there were good parts of it and there were negative parts. The good parts were the fact that the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Kaaba, had been set up in Mecca by the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So therefore, no matter what changes the people went through in Arabia, they did have a fundamental understanding of the Creator, of Allah, as the supreme being above all other forces in the universe. They also were blessed, in a sense, with generosity and with character and with loyalty. They were very loyal to their families and to their tribes. And if a guest would come, even if the guest was their enemy, they would even be loyal to the person because that person was a guest. And these type of qualities are very rare in other parts of the world. Arabian society also was famous for its eloquence and language. They did not have much in terms of physical culture, but in terms of their understanding of their language and their oral traditions passed on from generation to generation. They were masters. And this set the stage for the coming of the last revelation, Al-Quran, whose greatest aspect is its linguistic uniqueness and the challenges that come through the revelation. And that is basically, in the beginning, a challenge of language. And so all of these aspects set the stage for the coming of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. Within Jahiliyyah as well, on the negative side, there was tribalism. It was a tribal society based upon the law of the jungle. The strong will survive. And it was the unions of the families that came together to make the tribes that literally formed the political landscape in the Arabian Peninsula. And so Jahiliyyah was not ignorance in the sense that people do not have knowledge, but it was ignorance in the sense that they had left the revelation and they had sunken themselves in idol worship, having over 360 idols in the Kaaba itself. But there's another part of Jahiliyyah that I want to discuss with you, and it's a very important concept that I want you to pay a lot of attention to, because for those students of Islamic history, you'll see that this comes back and it explains certain aspects of Islamic history. And that is that the society itself, the relationship of the tribes, form a type of mentality. So in other words, if you are living in a place where there are people on a mountainside and people by the river, and they struggle for power over the agricultural area, then that makes up their mentality. if it's an area where there's a big savanna and you have nomadic people and you have agricultural people, that makes up how they look at each other and look at the world. And that's a type of Jahiliyyah, and all of us carry this within us. Whether you come from a country that's got north and south, or as they say in the Caribbean, you have big islands and small islands. You have big countries and small countries. This is a type of mentality. And it's good in a sense of identity, but when the tribalism goes further than that, it can cause major divisions in people, and it is only through Islam that this tribalism can be wiped out. The danger is that human beings, if we are not practicing Islam, if we are not constantly purifying ourselves, we can slip back into our previous way of thinking and start looking at each other that, no, you are the people from the south, you are the people from that tribe, you are the people of a certain color, you are the people of a certain language. That's, in a sense, ignorance. It's a type of Jahiliyyah. And we will be going back to this as we go further on in Islamic history. So the Arabian Peninsula at that time, as we learned, the focal point of it was the Kaaba itself in Mecca. Because this was the greatest cultural heritage that the Arabs could actually feel proud about. And not only that, it was in a central position in the Hijaz area, which is the western side of the Arabian Peninsula. And the leading tribes in that area were actually an amalgamation of people. This is another point that you won't get in normal history books. And that is the fact that Ibrahim alayhi salam, who built the Kaaba, the main patriarch of the Kaaba, was originally from Iraq. He was not of the original Arabs. They had a type of Semitic tongue they were speaking there. So when he traveled through Palestine and Egypt and the area, he was able to adjust his language. But he was not from what we knew as Al-Arab al-Ariba, the original pure Arabs. Secondly, his wife, Hajar, may Allah be pleased with her, was an Egyptian. And she came from the Nile Valley. So in today's discussion, she was an African. So this is literally the Tigris and Euphrates region, which marries the Nile Valley, and the son is Ismail alayhi salam. Ismail marries from the tribe of Jurhum, which is from Arab al-Ariba, from the pure original Arabs. So the children of Ismail coming in this lineage, they are a combination of the Nile Valley, Tigris and Euphrates Valley, the pure Arabian people, and from this comes the Quraysh. And they are the leading tribe. And so this amalgamation of power centers in the Middle East brings forward a type of nobility which eventually spread throughout the world, and which people from different power sources in the world could actually look toward and see themselves inside of it. They could actually respect this group because it is not one particular area, it's actually a combination. So the lineage of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, is very important. His family tree, what happens in the family tree. And we want to go through this slowly so we can try to understand what happened in Arabia, because this will have impact on the formation of dynasties after the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Think about the different time periods, right? Those students of history. You have the prophetic period, and then you have the Khulafa al-Rashidin, then you have the Umayyad dynasty, and then you have the Abbasid dynasty. These are the leading dynasties in the Muslim world for over 1,000 years. And so, in looking at the lineage of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, there are different ways that the historians look at it. One version of the lineage traces back his family tree to his upper grandparent, whose name is Adnan. And that is the most authenticated and easier to follow lineage of all the biographers and genealogists. The second version, this traces his lineage back to Ibrahim alayhi salam, but there is some doubt and divisions in terms of the actual names themselves, who they actually were, although everybody agrees, all the historians agree, that the lineage does go back through Ismail to Ibrahim alayhi salam. But if you get into the details of history, you'll see that there's some disagreement in terms of some of the grandparents way up along the top. The third form of it is that which is traced all the way back to Adam alayhi salam. And in some of the history books, they traced it back with 18 people. But this is actually incorrect, and it doesn't have sound sources. Because if you look 18 generations, that does not go back to the presence of Homo sapiens sapiens on this earth. When, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathed the spirit into Adam alayhi salam. You're talking a long period of time. It's not 18 parents to go back to Adam. And in any event, the sources are actually weak. So it cannot be authenticated in terms of the sources, and logically, it doesn't make sense. Although everybody goes back to Adam alayhi salam, so it is correct to say that they are descendants of Adam, because all human beings are descendants of Adam and Hawa. So his lineage, and this is the way many of the books actually begin. And this information will be coming to the students who have access to the books, which are on the way. But his lineage basically, and this is how many of the Seerah books begin. So literally, Seerah books begin like this. They don't usually give you a background. And it begins with the reading of Adnan. And so it goes, he is Muhammad, of course in Arabic, Huwa Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib. Okay, but I'll say it in English. So he is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, ibn Abdul Muttalib, ibn Hashim, ibn Abd Manaf, ibn Qusay, ibn Kilab, ibn Murrah, ibn Ka'b, ibn Lu'ay, ibn Ghalib, ibn Fiqh, ibn Malik, ibn ad-Nadr, ibn Kinana, ibn Khuzaymah, ibn Mudrika, ibn Ilyas, ibn Mudar, ibn Nizar, ibn Ma'ad, ibn Adnan. So this is the most authentic lineage from Ibn Hisham, and that's the basic source book that we are using. And if you go back where it said Ibn Ghalib ibn Fiqh, now this is up in his grandparents. Fiqh, his nickname was Quraysh. So that's where the name Quraysh comes from. It's Fiqh, it's one of the grandparents that's higher up there on the list. But the crucial person now that we need to study is that when we go from Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf ibn Qusay. Now this grandparent is very important because Qusay, and this is the 5th century, he was born about 480 AD or CE, and he distinguishes himself because he consolidated power. So he took Mecca from being a loose confederation of Bedouins and city people together respecting the family of Quraysh because of the Kaaba. He took it from that to form a government. And so this literally changed the course of history, and he did this by establishing some key ministries. And these ministries that he established, the first of the ministries is the one called Hijaba. And the Hijaba was the guardianship of the keys of the Kaaba. Now this might sound strange to you, but it's very important because Ibrahim alayhi salam built a house. The Kaaba was originally a house, and the door to get into the Kaaba and the main idols are inside there. So the keys of the Kaaba are very important, and literally there's a ministry surrounding that. 2 is Qiyada, and the Qiyada was the leadership of the army, and that includes the Liwa, right? And so this is literally your minister of defense. This is your defense ministry. The next is Nadwa, and the Nadwa was the chairmanship of the meetings. This is like your ministries, like your prime minister in a sense, who is leading all the ministers in their meetings. The Nadwa itself was a type of meeting place, a council chamber in a sense, not buildings like we know them, but it was an area that they set aside especially for the council meetings of the elders of Quraysh and the other tribes who were in the leading positions there at the time. The next of the main ministries was called Siqaya. And the Siqaya was the provision of water, especially for the travelers and for the pilgrims. And this, for people living in Canada, doesn't really make too much sense. But in the desert, this is essential, because water is life. So the one who provides the water, who takes care of the water, is one of the most important individuals in the government and one of the most beloved to the people, because water is the essential of life, especially in the desert area. And the last was Rifada. And the Rifada was the provision of food. So this is literally the one who is in charge of the crops and storage and the imports and exports. So this is a very important ministry as well. And so Qusay, in a sense, was a type of a king. So it's not just a respected family, but he's literally a power force within the basic government of Mecca at the time. And he established the Nadwa. He made this Nadwa not only a place for the council, but he allowed weddings to be held in the Nadwa, elders to come and meet. So they had elder meetings because they had great respect for their elders. The poets would also come to recite for them. Foreign dignitaries who came on caravans passing through would also meet in the Nadwa. So he's developing now his parliament, his prime minister, his ministry of defense, his main key ministries. So in a sense, he develops a government, and because he is the leading person in Quraysh, then he was above all of the ministries. So he was, in a sense, like the king of Mecca at that time. And because the Quraysh had a special position, and because they did have economic power, he made them pay a special tax to the Siqaya and the Rifada to make sure that those ministries are supported. He taxed the Quraysh for this. A very wise move, because this is a way that revenue is coming in to the two life-giving forces within the society itself. Now, when Qusay became old and feeble, he met with his 3 sons. And his main 3 sons was Abdul Manaf, Abdul Uzza, and Abdul Dar. Of course, these names are strange to us now because we usually say Abdullah, Abdul Hakim, the names of Allah. But you see Abdul Uzza, right? Manaf. This means the slave of an idol named Manaf, right? A slave of an idol named Uzza. So these are literally idol worshipping type names. And so Qusay needed to divide up power amongst his children. And he made the intention and carried it out, where he delegated the 5 responsibilities to Abdul Dar. Now, why he did that, we don't know from history why he made that move. Many of the sources do say that Abdul Manaf, in terms of his personality, he was the most respected of the sons by the people of Mecca. There is something in Abdul Manaf and his children. It's a type of charisma that they had, a type of gift with words and a gift with dealing with people. But Abdul Dar more than likely was an individual who could actually exude power. And so Qusay wanted this kingdom, in a sense, to continue. And so he gave all the 5 responsibilities to Abdul Dar. And Abdul Manaf, now who later comes along, his sons, the main 3 sons of Abdul Manaf, it's Hashim, Abdul Shams, and Nawfal. Okay, so these are the main sons of Abdul Manaf. And they formed a type of alliance. And this alliance was called Hilf al-Mutayyibin. It was the pact or the treaty of those who dipped their hands in perfume. It was a symbolic act that they did, and they literally dipped their hands together, and I guess it was better than dipping it in blood. Right? But they dipped it into some nice musk or jasmine and put their hands together, and they made an alliance, okay, between the brothers. Okay, so this formed a power group within Mecca itself. The sons of Abdul Dar, and they had power, they formed another alliance, Hilf al-Ahlaf. So this was the alliance of those who are allied. And so these became 2 power forces in Mecca itself. The other son, Abdul Uzza, he wasn't seeking power at all, and his side of the family wasn't so strong. But these 2 forces now become the rival tribes or the rival sub-tribes within Quraysh. Okay, try to understand this now, because it sets the stage for the future. And literally, the 2 tribes or the 2 sub-tribes were about to go to war. And this was a very serious situation. And fortunately, these 2 groups, if they had gone to war, it would have destabilized Mecca completely. But they made a compromise. And this is called Hilf al-Fudul. Now, early Seerah does not have much information about this compromise, but it was a very wise move that was made. And so within this Hilf al-Fudul, the descendants of Abdul Dar, they would be in charge of Qiyada, Nadwa, and Hijaba. Okay, so they maintained power, right? They have the army, they have the keys to the Kaaba, they have the political power, the ministry, right? And the descendants of Abdul Manaf, they would be in charge of Rifada and Siqaya, the watering for the pilgrims and providing food. So it's a power sharing type of situation, but people's tendency is to have more love for the ones who are feeding them and taking care of them than the ones who have the political power. And you see this in many parts of the world. There are those who have the gun and they have the badge and they are the strong people, but then you have other people who have a charisma about them and they take care of you and they love you. So this is how it's set up now. Okay, so this is a struggle going on. And again, this is forming a type of mentality in the minds of the people. And Amr, or Hashim, the son of Abdul Manaf, he became the leader from amongst the sons of Abdul Manaf. His original name was Amr, but they called him Hashim because when a drought hit Mecca, he literally crushed seeds and grains and he made soup for the people. So they gave him the name Hashim, but his actual name is Amr. Okay, Hashim is his nickname. And he's a very important person, very charismatic. You see, that look that charisma coming from Abdul Manaf. Hashim, was probably, like the greatest version of this charisma. Not only in Mecca itself, but he went north to Gaza, along the coastline, which is now Philistine, where Gaza is. And he made a treaty with the Romans. And the treaty was that there would be summer caravans that would go north, and that there would be winter caravans that would go south. And so what he literally did was set up economic trade movement through the Hijaz. And this is so important that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even mentions in Surah Al-Quraysh. We know, لِإِلَافِ قُرَيْشِ إِلَافِهِمْ رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. Okay, that these are the Quraysh, the movement of the Quraysh. They have journeys in the summer and journeys in the winter. Okay, so literally it's mentioned that they should فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, that they should worship the Lord of this house, الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَأَمَانَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. And the surah ends that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that took care of their hunger and also gave them peace and security. So this is actually for Hashim, that this verse. So we can see that even in our Quran itself, you understand more about the book of Allah if you understand the history. And you can see the background that comes out of that history. And so the power struggle. Eventually, because of the moves that were being made by Hashim, the respect of the people of the society actually moved toward the Hashimites. And they literally, the power of Abdul literally waned down. They had the key itself, they supposedly had the ministry, but the real power in the city was with Hashim and his descendants. And it is here that another type of struggle comes in. And again, this is the mentality of human beings. But another type of struggle comes in. And this is between Hashim and his nephew, whose name was Umayyah. Now I want to show you this here now, to try to understand something here. Again, this will help us to understand something about Islamic history. If we look here at Abdul Manaf ibn Qusay, right, and then the sons of Abdul Manaf, okay? And on this side, of course, under Manaf is Hashim, okay? And then Abdul Muttalib, right? And then his children, right? From this is Abdullah, and then comes the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You can see how that lineage goes there. On this side here, you have Abdul Shams, and from him comes Umayyah. So the struggle that was going on between the Hashimites and Abdul Dar, he's not in this picture, that one subsided. But the struggle now began within the descendants of Hashim, and it wasn't Abdul Shams himself, but it was his nephew, whose name was Umayyah. He was a power seeker. So Umayyah started to seek power within Mecca itself in order to gain power for the Umayyads. Okay, so this is their Jahiliyyah now. It became the Hashimites versus Umayyads. This was the power source in Mecca. Now for those students of history, I just want to give you a little look into the future. Umayyah, look at Umayyah. Under Umayyah, Harb, Abu Sufyan, Muawiyah. Here is the Umayyad dynasty. Remember, Hashimites, Umayyads, right? Who takes over afterwards? Umayyads. Right? On this side, there is the uncle, there is of course Abu Talib, and then there is Ali. Okay, Ali carries, this is where the charisma is now. Ali carries the charisma. And it continues on through his family, but on his uncle, one of the uncles of the Prophet, Al-Abbas, he's Hashimite. From him comes Abbasids. So these are your dynasties. So literally, the dynasties of Mecca, or the dynasties ruling the Muslim world, had something to do with the understanding of the Quraysh and the people in their Jahiliyyah. Okay, it's something about that there's an influence in this. And as we go further on in history, you'll begin to understand this more and more. Fortunately, when the Prophet ﷺ now brings Islam, it overcomes all this. But after he leaves, the mentality starts to slip back. And people start to identify, yes, I'm Muslim, however, I'm Umayyad. And that is the reason why when Uthman ibn Affan, remember, Umayyah, Abul As, Affan, Uthman. When he took over as the Khalifa, that was the first time he was an Umayyad. And the Umayyads got a lot from Uthman. He was an easygoing person. He used to say yes to everything. So they literally got a lot out of Uthman. And when he was finally assassinated, this side wanted revenge. But when Ali ibn Abi Talib was chosen as the Khalifa, it meant that it went back to the Hashimite side. You see? So this partly influenced the way people look at things. This is a human weakness. It is a reality. Our identity is there. We have to constantly struggle with our identity. Is it just my name? Is it just my family? Is it just where I come from? Or does it make me better than the other people? Or does it make me the one who actually deserves power over the other people? And we'll be going back to this as we go on further, inshallah, in Islamic history. But this sets the stage for you for what had actually gone on. Now, getting back to Hashim. Hashim, again, was going north to Gaza. He established a treaty with the Romans. And on one of his journeys north, he married a woman from the tribe of Khazraj. The Aus and the Khazraj, these were the main tribes in Medina, at that time known as Yathrib. They originally came from Yemen. They were Arab al-Araba, and they were living in Yathrib at the time. So he married a Khazraji woman named Salma. And unfortunately, when he went north to Gaza, he passed away. So he literally died. Hashim is buried in Gaza. Okay, but from that marriage and the time that he spent with his wife came a child. And that child's name was Shayba. Shayba. Okay? And Shayba literally was living in Mecca itself. When the uncles, when the families, the brothers of Hashim heard about his death and his family, Al-Muttalib, who was one of the brothers, went north in order to straighten out the affairs of Hashim. He found the son, Shayba. And so he literally brought the son back to Mecca. And the people of Mecca didn't know about Shayba because he's part Khazraji, right, from Yathrib. As they were entering into Mecca, they saw the boy moving with Al-Muttalib, taking care of things and giving him respect. So then the people said, well, who is this? And they said, well, it must be a slave. So they called him Abdul Muttalib, the slave of Al-Muttalib. You see this? But his name was Shayba. That's actually his name. But the nicknames sometimes overcome the normal names, like the great Abu Huraira, the father of kittens. He used to give milk to kittens, and literally 40, 50 kittens would chase him into the masjid. So he was the father of the small cats, the small kittens. His name was Abdurrahman ibn Sakhr, radiallahu anh. But Abu Huraira overcame in terms of that nickname that he had. So literally, we find that Abdul Muttalib, following this, becomes the leader of Mecca. When the parents pass away, when Hashim had passed away, Al-Muttalib passed away, then Abdul Muttalib, who was carrying that charisma, he had that same charisma and that respect, that natural respect of the Hashimite group. He took over as the leader of Mecca itself, and of course he focused on the duties of Siqaya and Rifada. So these are, again, the two main duties that were within the Hashimite family. And in order to deal with the people, especially the watering of the people, their water was literally had run out. And he had a dream. And in this dream, he saw himself digging in between two of the idols that were outside of the Kaaba, Isaf and Na'ila. And so literally, he dreamt that this was filled with dirt by the Jurhum tribe, and so they literally dug in this area in between these idols, and water came out. This is the well of Zamzam, which had been originally flowing from the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, but after a period of time, it had stopped. And so he literally now brings forth the water, and they found some ancient artifacts as well under the ground, which added to his notoriety. And he consolidated power. But he said that now, in order for me to really do this properly, I need sons. So one of the ways in Jahiliyyah, which some Muslims do up until today, he made an oath to Allah. He said, "Oh Allah, if you give me 10 sons, right, then I will literally sacrifice one of them to the gods." Okay? And he was talking to all the gods, actually. So he literally said, to the gods, Allah the Supreme God, Lat, Uzza, Manaf, whatever, if I get the 10 sons, one of them will be a sacrifice. Like some people say today, "Oh Allah, if I pass my examination, I will give so much money in sadaqah." Right? And then if he fails, he's angry with Allah. Right? This is Jahiliyyah, that's ignorance, right? And so it was a type of ignorant oath that he made. But by the will of Allah, 10 sons were born. And so with the 10 sons being born, he prepared himself for sacrifice. Now these are the 10 sons. You don't normally find this in history books as well. Okay? And these are the 10 for those who want to get the extra names. It's not in your notes. So these are the extra names. Abdul Muttalib, there is Abdullah, there is Hamza, Abu Lahab, whose name is Abdul Uzza, Az-Zubair, Mughira, Al-Muqawwim, Darar, Al-Harith, Al-Abbas, and Abu Talib. Now there are a few, of course, who are the most famous. The ones on the top, Abdullah and Abu Talib, of course. Then Hamza, then Abbas, right? And then Abu Lahab. The other ones are not really so famous, but you'd get them if you went deep into some history books. These are the ones agreed upon by Ibn Ishaq to Ibn Hisham. Some other books mention more, but these are the ones more authenticated. That Ibn Hisham did the work to authenticate the names of the actual 10. And so he made this oath to sacrifice one of the sons, and he was going to carry it out, because it's Jahiliyyah now. And they went to a magician, a fortune teller. So they asked the fortune teller, what should we do? And this is their way out of things. And the fortune teller said, draw lots. Draw lots. So if you draw lots, and then you can decide which one. Okay? So every time he drew the lot and it said Abdullah. And everybody was really upset because Abdullah carried the charisma. Remember that, that look, right? He had that charisma from Abdul Manaf, Hashim, and right on down. And so he continued to draw lots, and every time it said Abdullah, 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 10 times. And finally it was said that what he can do is that if he sacrifices, the diviner said, if you sacrifice 10 camels for each lot that you drew, then you would be absolved. So he literally sacrificed 100 camels, which is a lot of money in those days. He sacrificed 100 camels, and that was over. And that was Abdul Muttalib and his family, and this is literally setting the stage for the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. This is right around the time of Amul Fil, the year of the elephants. And this is the time of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And Abraha was attacking from the south. So literally at this time was a traumatic time for the people in Mecca. And Abdul Muttalib was the one who spoke with Abraha outside of Mecca and told him, I have no power over this city. This Kaaba, this house has got a Lord. I am the Lord of my camels. That's all. But the Kaaba has a Lord. And this Lord will protect the house. So the Hashimites and all of the people, Abdullah and his so-called army, they all ran up into the hills. And they waited. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the birds and defeated Abraha at that time. The political setting at the time of the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ sets the stage for the revelation, but it also has some future implications. And that basically is that the Banu Hashim tribe itself is loved by the people of Mecca. They are the people who deal with rifada and siqaya. They feed and they water the people, and they have the charisma. And they are the ones that have what you could call the natural leadership. But at the same time, the political power, the military power was in the hands of Banu Abdullah. And so in the background, they were in the background with the official political power. But the real struggle eventually left Banu Abdullah, and it was between Banu Hashim and Banu Umayyah. And even though they were within the same family, Hashim was actually the uncle of Umayyah. And it was the struggle that went on between the two and their factions that set the stage of hostility before the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And it said that it reached the point where, because of the pressure that the people applied to Umayyah, he was actually exiled from Mecca for 12 years. So he was literally exiled. And so this set the stage because a type of jealousy, a type of desire for power festered inside of the Banu Umayyah. And it is only later on that we see it arise again with a type of hostility that you'll see between Muawiyah and Ali. And you can't at the outset understand how there could be a rivalry like this or hostility, but if you go to the backgrounds, then we can see that there is a natural rivalry between these two camps, so to speak. And so this was the year of the elephants. It was the year when the army of Abraha, who had come from Abyssinia, were defeated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using birds carrying baked clay. It was a traumatic experience, literally, that the people of Mecca went through, and it reverberated all over the Arabian Peninsula. And it was during that time that the Prophet ﷺ was actually born. And right at that point, at his birth, Amina, his mother, again who was the wife of Abdullah, And it was, if we back up a little bit, Abdul Muttalib who actually chose Amina for Abdullah, his son, when he reached 24 years old. And Amina herself was bint Wahab, a descendant of Abd Manaf. So she was also from the Quraysh as well. And a very independent woman, very intelligent woman. And at the time, shortly after the Amil Fil had gone on, Abdullah actually left for Gaza. Again, these are the journeys that the Quraysh, the Hashimites of the Quraysh were taking north to south. And so it was due for somebody to go north on the journey. And literally these journeys sustained, economically sustained Mecca at the time. And Amina reports that, the henna of her marriage, had not even been erased from her hands as yet, and then her husband left. So she was really sad because of this. But in a beautiful story of Ayman, Baraka, who was an Ethiopian Abyssinian woman who was the servant in the household of Abdullah and Amina, that she comforted Amina at that point. And although the Arabs went to the mountains around Mecca, she refused to leave the house. So when the threat of the elephants had come outside of Mecca, she refused to leave. So she and Ayman were actually there, right down in the area of the Kaaba itself, but by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the army of Abraha was defeated. What added to her sorrow was that when Abdullah went north to Gaza, he passed away. So this happened, another tragedy into the family of Banu Hashim. But the child she realized she was pregnant. And it wasn't a normal pregnancy with the nausea and bad feeling that a woman gets in her early stages. She actually felt strong. And it was reported, Ibn Sa'd reports, that Amina said, when the child was born, there was a light that issued out of my womb and lit up the palaces of Busra, which is in Syria. And a voice said to her, name him Muhammad. It is also reported that the preceding night, just before the birth, 14 galleries of Kisra's palace in Persia cracked and tumbled to the ground. The sacred fire of the Majus, the Zoroastrians, the fire went out. And there were people they were charged to keep it lit. But the night before, the fire went out. Also, some of the churches on Lake Suwa sank down and collapsed at that time. A number of things were happening all over the world, at the coming of this beloved person, peace and blessings be upon him. Hassan ibn Thabit, who later became a Muslim, he reported, I was a well-grown boy of 7 or 8, understanding all that I heard, when I heard a Jewish man calling out at the top of his voice from the top of a fort in Yathrib. Now remember, Yathrib is in the north, and the Jewish tribes had migrated to Yathrib because within their traditions, they were taught that somebody from the descendants of Ibrahim alayhi salam would come to a valley which is on two sides. It has lava, dried lava. It has a lot of water and trees in the south. So they identified Yathrib as this place. And they moved there waiting for a prophet to come. And they used to say to the Arabs whenever they got into a fight with the Aus and Khazraj, when the prophet comes, we will kill you with him. So they expected him to come, but they did not expect that he would come from Ibrahim on the side of Hajar. They thought it was Sarah on that side coming from Isaac. And so this man now called up, he said, O company of Jews, they gathered together. They said, what is the matter? He answered, tonight the star under which Ahmed is to be born has arisen. The star is there. So all types of signs were actually happening around. The actual date of his birth And this again is a big controversy today, but we want to look at history for what it is and not be emotional and say, well, my people do this and my masjid or whatever. Reality is, when you go into the history books, you find that some people say he was born on the 5th of Rabi al-Awwal. Some say he was born on the 9th. Some say he was born on the 19th. But, of course, the majority agreed on Monday the 12th, Rabi al-Awwal, 570 AD. But you'll see in history books, literally, that they have the 5th, the 9th, or the 19th. So it is not agreed upon. And it was not of such importance to the people at that time what specific day they were born on. And that is the reason why you find that his birthday was never actually taken as a celebration during his life, nor in the life of his companions, nor in the Tabi'een or Tabi'een and 3 generations after him. It wasn't until about 1,000 years after his death that in Egypt and in Syria they started to celebrate his birthday. And they chose the 12th, because that is the majority position in terms of which day it actually is. They chose that and they made a celebration there. Some say the intention was because people had gotten weak in terms of giving sadaqah, giving charity. So they wanted to remind them of the Prophet ﷺ on that time and give charity. Also, of course, other prophets and saints and other people have birthdays. So they said, well, if they have a birthday, then we need a birthday. There's a number of reasons, and there's arguments and counter-arguments that go back and forth. But from a historical perspective, it is very clear that there's no total agreement on the actual date. The importance is that he was born, and that with this is a major change in history. I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have and feedback from what has come before, or especially now in this last part. Yes, brother.
Ibrahim was in a very fertile valley of Tigris. So he migrated from there to Egypt, and then, so how it happened that he came and ended his journey to Makkah?
So the question is, how was it that Ibrahim alayhi salam started in Iraq and then went through Palestine, Egypt, and ended up in Mecca? Of course, we believe that he was guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was literally following a type of revelation to go to the different places. And so he was literally led to these places through inspiration by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he found, the ruins of the house that some say was built actually from the beginning of time in Mecca itself. Now, floor is open for any other questions. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Hashim is the one who crushes up seeds and grains and makes soup. Yeah, because there was a drought in Mecca at the time, and Amr himself led feeding of the people. Remember, Rifada and Siqaya, right? The main things of the Banu Hashim was to feed the people and to give them the drink. So he dealt with this drought. It was a famine. And he literally, with his own hands, was literally involved in the feeding of the people at that time. So he got that name of being Hashim. Floor is open for any questions anybody has.
Out of those 5 important ministries, is the Siqaya supposed to be one of the top?
Really the most important?
Yeah.
They don't really give weight to which one is, but more than likely it is, because water, when somebody comes out the desert, the first thing you have to give him is water. He doesn't care about food. And we know, those of us who have lived in the desert, know, especially if you fast in Ramadan. I can recall being in Medina with no air conditioner in the middle of the summer, as a poor student, and then when the fast comes, all you can think of is water. Food has no relevance, right? So the water is the most important thing. As Allah said, He made every living thing from water. Now, the floor is open for any other questions anybody has concerning.
Incidents that the Kasra palace was destroyed, and so how authentic they are?
The incident about the army of Abraha.
And of that the fire of the was
In terms of the things surrounding the birth of the Prophet ﷺ, they are reported in Ibn Ishaq. So this doesn't have the same weight as a authentic hadith, but it does come within the text of Ibn Ishaq or Ibn Hisham. Ibn Hisham abbreviated and corrected Ibn Ishaq. So it is in Ibn Hisham.
even
Yeah,
Shibli Nomani has quoted it in his Seerah al-Nabi,
right.
but in a different way.
Yeah, so many people quote these things, and it gives a general background of the time. Now, any other questions anybody has? Yeah, go ahead.
So the Prophet's father, so Abdullah, he was in commerce, like he traded. Was that his business?
Yes, because the Quraysh at the time, their main business was trade. The main business of Mecca was trade.
So it was like everybody, pretty much all of the males or father figures at some point involved in caravans and trading and that kind of
Right, especially since the agreement that Hashim made with the Byzantine Romans. So literally, they would agree upon a time, and the Roman boats would come to Gaza, which is on the coast there, Mediterranean coast, and they would come up from the south. And of course, they were bringing from the south, they got frankincense from Oman, and also coffee from Ethiopia and Yemen, mocha and myrrh and all types of things, spices were coming. And they carried these products that could last in the desert. And so they brought them north, and then there they got different supplies. Because the Romans naturally had metal, weapons, tools, leather, other things. So they traded, for these valuable things. And it's really a brisk trade. And if you think about that, that's the reason why Mecca was, very powerful at the time. Because the Romans were the most powerful people in the whole of the Mediterranean at that time. So Mecca was a place. It's actually on the map in terms of the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, especially when you think about Gaza today. May Allah liberate it. But you see that Gaza is a very important position. It's a very strategic place on the coastline there. Because of how it's always been a port, in that area where, the boats have come. And also prophets pass through there, like going to the Sinai Peninsula. So it's always been a very strategic link between Palestine, Syria, and Egypt. So it's a key link going right across there. And it's a very important place up until today. Now, any other general questions anybody has? So the birth of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. This was an event that had reverberations around the world. And after his father died in the north, his sponsorship or guardianship was taken over by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. And Abdul Muttalib used to really take care of him. He would even sit him on his lap as a young boy and really give him personal attention because, he had lost his father. And then, shortly after that, he had another major loss in his life of his mother. But it is in this early time now, when he is very young with his mother, that another important incident happens, or another aspect of his life happens. And that is that the Meccan leadership at the time, they used to send their children out to the desert, to the Badia. And they would send them out there for a number of very important reasons. Because the life in the desert actually, is a free, open type of atmosphere, whereas in the city, although it's not cluttered like our cities, but still, when you're in the desert region, it's open, and the air is clean, and the environment is clean, and in a sense, it doesn't have a lot of contact with foreign elements. So even people who are coming on caravans, they will carry disease with them, viruses. There's a lot of things that come along, in meeting people from other places. But outside, in the Badia itself, it's a place where people naturally are physically fit. At the time, they knew how to access the wells and whatnot. So in a sense, it is a type of training camp that they literally would send their children to be in the desert in their early years. Also, out in that area, the people who lived in the Bedouin tribes, they maintained the classical Arabic. The people who lived in the city, they would come in contact with other people speaking other languages. And naturally, as business people, up until today, the Meccan people, if you go to Hajj and Umrah, they can look at you and read you, you're American or you're European or you're Chinese. They see you walk and they start talking your language. Okay, so they can at least do business in about 20 different languages. So they're natural business people because of the trade that has always gone through them. But the people in the desert don't come in contact. They don't have to learn 20 different dialects. And so they maintain, in a sense, the purity of language. And the purity of language is an important aspect of the prophethood, in the sense that it is the Quran itself, which is the highest form of Arabic, that came through the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And it's also said that when he would speak in a very high, very classical way. So even scholars who are checking hadiths, they will see a certain hadith being read, and part of the criticism of a hadith is that it's weak in language. So they'll know that's not his talk. Like he doesn't talk patois like we do. Patois and, Ammiya. He's speaking a high dialect of the Qurayshi Arabic. So immediately the muhaddith can tell if somebody has invented the hadith. Not just because of the chain, but because of the matan, or the body of the hadith itself. Okay? Not only does it contradict the Quran and contradict Islamic values, but literally the language within the body of the hadith itself. So the first wet nurse of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was Thuwayba. And Thuwayba was the servant of his uncle Abu Lahab. So Abu Lahab wasn't so bad in those days. So that was his servant. She was the first wet nurse, meaning the one who suckled the child. And then he was taken out to Halima bint Abi Dhu'ayb of the Banu Sa'd. And she was from the Hawazin tribe, a very big tribe. And it so happened at that time that they were suffering from famines, and they had difficulty, and she was even having some problems with her own child or whatnot. And so what they would do is literally come in and they would hire themselves out to suckle a child and to take care of the child. And because of the trust that they have with the people of the Badia, again, this is the good part of their Jahiliyyah, that they trusted each other, and the tribal system as well. They could actually give their child away for a few years. And that's something which is difficult for us to do today. Even in some of the boarding schools and residential schools, unfortunately, many terrible things happen sometimes in these boarding schools. And so people really think twice about sending their children away. But so it was that the Prophet ﷺ was sent to Halima, and the animals were suffering in the drought, and she herself. But once she took over the child, the Prophet ﷺ, there was a barakah with him. There was a blessing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed him right from the early phases. So when she took the child, she felt strength coming in her body, and literally her breasts were filled with milk. And then the animals, literally, their udders with the milk was overflowed. And this was strange for them because it didn't rain out. So it was strange. It was like a barakah that was coming out of the child. their animals actually multiplied. And they recognized that this child was a great blessing. And she wanted to return him. Really, around 2 years old, Amina refused. And it is said that he stayed with Halima until he's somewhere between 4 and 5 years old. So he stayed some period of time. And this is important because his language is forming now. When you go into the early ages, the makharaj al-huruf, how you pronounce things is forming. And the structure of your body is forming. And these early days and months are very important in the life of an individual. And so it was in the 4th year that while he was out in the Badir itself, that 2 angels came and they opened up his chest and they removed black drops from his chest and they cleaned it with snow. And this incident, as reported through the books of tafsir, this is the incident called the opening of the chests in Shirah. And this is, in the Quran itself, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, right? Surah al-Inshirah. Did we not open up, your chest? And so it literally comes from the incident that happened with him as a child. So again, to understand the Quran itself, it's not all in the prophethood. It's some things before the prophethood. So we have to understand the circumstances surrounding the Prophet ﷺ and the prophethood in order to understand. And when this had happened, and Halima found out about this, like they were gripped with fear. They didn't know what was going on. And it's reported that a group of Abyssinians were actually passing through. And when they heard about the situation and saw the boy, they said, let us take him with us. Because this boy has got a future. Let us take him to Ethiopia. Okay, now remember, Ethiopia's got a large army. It's got technology. And remember that the gap between Arabia and Ethiopia is not the Pacific Ocean, right? It's only the Red Sea. In Djibouti and on the coast on a clear day, you can see Yemen. You can see it. That's how close it is. So the cultures of the people are also very close. So they recognize that this, could be a great child, but of course they refused to give up the child. And eventually she returned the child to the mother and she went off the scene. But scholars like Ibn Hajar, Ibn Mundir, Ibn al-Jawzi, and others, they say that she actually embraced Islam with her husband in Mecca. So they record her as Sahabi. She embraced Islam, later on. And the Prophet ﷺ used to say, I am the most eloquent of you as I belong to Quraysh, and my accent is that of Banu Sa'd. Okay, so he literally related to Banu Sa'd in terms of his accent. Okay, so this is a great fadl, or a great preference, for the Banu Sa'd, the tribe of Sa'd. So their language is actually very important. So there are some great lessons in this for us. It's very important lessons. Can anybody think of any of the lessons that you get out of this? This phase of the life of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him? Anything for ourselves in terms of our living and whatnot? Can anybody think of anything?
For young children, for toddlers, the importance of experiencing the outdoors rather than being confined in a daycare or something.
That's right. This is tarbiyah. This is a crucial thing for our children today. And you see it over and over again when you go to people's homes and you look at the children. Most of the children now handheld devices like this, with handheld devices. Spending all their time on this. Okay? Where's the physical aspect, of our lives is so important, the rounded Islamic personality. And so this is a type of guidance for us. Remember, go outside the city. You see it? Breathe the fresh air. Drink the water. Be away from the cluttered, polluted atmosphere, of the city. So this is one great lesson that we get out of that. And so camps, we should encourage camping. Our own families, our communities, go away to camps. They should spend the whole summer in camps instead of the latest Batman and Spider-Man. They should spend the time outside with real spiders and real bats. Any other questions? Yes, any other points?
Basically, socially isolated as well as never touch any natural thing like the earth, as well as they touch kind of creepy.
Exactly. So this is important, to go out to really feel nature. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation is perfect. We are the ones that are imperfect and destroy the creation. But if we go outside, and we're blessed in Canada to have a lot of, outside areas and parks and whatnot, go out into nature itself. Now.
This is a bit unrelated, but why don't the Bedouins of today speak classical Arabic? Or in fact, why is their Arabic even worse than the Arabic of the people of the city?
Again, now, remember the different types of Arabs. There is al-Arab al-Ariba, the pure Arabs, and then there's Musta'raba. So the Musta'raba are the Arabized Arabs, right? That's the second, and of course al-Ba'ida, the perished Arabs are the ones that are gone. Al-Musta'raba, who are the majority of Arabs now, are actually people who originally did not speak Arabic. So therefore their language will be affected by their former languages and the place where they come from. So you'll hear, a Lebanese person, they were Phoenicians originally, the Moroccans and Algerians were Berbers, Sudanese, some people were Nubians. There's different languages that people actually speak, which affects their Arabic. Like I say, in the Gulf region, you'll find many people in Abu Dhabi and Bahrain and Dubai, they speak Farsi, Persian. And if you hear their Arabic, it sounds almost like Persian or something, but they're speaking Arabic. But the people who live in the desert region, and up until today, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but when I learned Arabic in Medina, I was looking around the students to see who I could learn from. And I did not want to learn, from the people who give me all these different languages. They say I would say, they say Masmuka. I say Ismi Abdullah. That's classical Arabic. So they would say to you, Ish Ishmuk, instead of Masmuka. Shinnu Ismuk, Ismuk A. There are all types of way of saying it, right? So I found amongst the Yemenis, Yemenis, especially who live in the desert or in the mountains, and then parts of Arabia too, the ones that are away. You'll get their local language is very high Arabic. The only thing is that you got to slow them down because they talk so fast, right? You can hardly understand what they're saying. They're talking, but if you slow him down, he's actually speaking a type of classical Arabic. It's probably the closest. Although, of course, each country will say, "Well, my language is the closest." Everybody, but Allah knows best. They are al-Arab al-Araba. That's where it originally came from. And you'll still find it amongst the people who do live out there. You'll find a, clearer form and of the words that they're using, not so affected, by the thing.
One lesson could be the importance of teaching youth and maybe just ourselves how to speak our language to the best of our abilities. So it's like to speak a high level of the language you're speaking, perhaps?
Yes, this is important also. In other words, to give importance to language.
Right.
And that's why the Prophet ﷺ would say, my accent is Banu Sa'd. Right, so he was proud of his form of Arabic. And similarly, we should be proud of our native language. And I say, in other words, Logatul what was the language of your mother? So if your language was originally Urdu or Swahili or Turkish, your children should know this, as well as learning Arabic and as well as learning, of course, English. And what some young Muslims are doing today, along with their English and Arabic, they're studying Mandarin Chinese. Because if you know those three, you'll be on top of the world in the 21st century. But at least what we have to do is to know our mother tongue, not to let the children forget it. right? They'll learn English naturally and classical Arabic as well, and give emphasis to learning it, learn language. Now,
What was the benefit of the Bedouins taking in the children of all these tribes? Like, what did they gain from that?
the Bedouins, they were literally paid for this. So they hired themselves out. And the Quraysh, of course, they are the wealthy people. So for them, they're literally paid. And it also could mean grazing, pasture rights, and there's other rights when caravans come in. So there's a lot of things when you are doing something for the Quraysh. But they're literally paid.
Like, in the last 7 to 10 years, Saudi Arabia and all the Middle East people, they're spending a lot of money in education, especially in public school, but somewhere or the other, the people who have gone over there and they came back after 2-3 years, they say that it's like babysitting, nobody would like to learn anything. What is the reality on it?
As far as like traveling outside and coming back, yes, this is having a devastating effect upon the societies that are going to different countries, and not just picking up the good parts, but some of the negative parts, as well. And then also some of the nannies. You mean the nannies who are taking care of the children, who don't speak the language. This is having a devastating effect.
So I'm talking about the students not willing to learn anything.
That's right.
They're in schools, they're in public schools, like,
Yeah. So I mean, this is again, it's how we have to set the stage for the younger generation. And if we place importance upon this, the child will naturally be geared towards it. And one of the key points as well is adab. It is, your etiquettes. This is a very important thing because the Bedouins at that time, they had generosity, and, they had haya. They had, shame and modesty and things like this. So you also learn that when you're out in the Badia. You learn, adab. And this is very important because the Prophet ﷺ distinguished himself as that he was known for a person who had, good, etiquettes and, truthfulness and straightforwardness. These are all part of the mentality of the Bedouin people at that time. Okay? Any other points?
To touch on the communication thing,
Yeah.
there was an article I was reading about that people who text and communicate more aren't, especially teenagers, people in their 20s and early 30s, are having a tough time with communicating verbally to other people because they spend so much time talking to each other through digital devices that they're losing the ability to communicate effectively human to human verbally through their mouth. And then also the vocabulary is dropping because we use like LOL or TTYL and all that stuff, and we use shorthand to communicate now and through digital devices and if they clock the hours in the day that people spend communicating with one another, and for a lot of people now it's actually more time communicating through digital means some days than actual physical person-to-person communicating.
Yeah, I mean, they even have, the case of they're at dinner time and then the father's turning to, said, no, are you talking to your sister on your cell phone? Like across the dinner table, right?
Yeah.
They won't even talk. They like send a message, across. So now, in conclusion, when this phase of his life was over and he became around 6 years old, his mother journeyed up into Yathrib, and she wanted to go to Gaza area to visit the grave of the father. And when she went there and came back, she became very sick. And at a place called Abwa, which is in between Medina and Mecca, she passed away. And her servant, Ayman, who later became Muslim, radiallahu anha, the mother said to Ayman, be a mother to my child. And she said, from that point, I never left him, either physically or spiritually. And this is a very important point, because the whole tribalism, racism thing, which is in the minds of many Muslims, she literally became his second mother. To the point where, when they reached Medina, and Ayman was one of the people who had to stay back after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ to take care of his household, get everything set. When she reached Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, literally came out to meet her, and he greeted her, and he literally cleaned her feet and rubbed her shoulders, right? She was an elderly woman, and there was no verses of hijab that were actually revealed at that time. And she remembered, he remembered her all the way through her life. And so this is a very important incident that took place, and she literally became his second mother. Abdul Muttalib, of course, was his father in a sense, and but then later, after 2 years, Abdul Muttalib died. He was about 82 years old at that point in the early life of the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Talib, his uncle, took over as his key point. The last part about this understanding of the political settings in Mecca is that all of the positions of power in Mecca, except for Siqaya, went to the Umayyads. Now, in that list, you have Harb, who was the father of Abu Sufyan. Right? You have Umayyah and Harb and Abu Sufyan. So Harb, at that point, made a strong political move. The people of Abdullah, they had the key to the Kaaba and everything, but they weren't doing anything with it. They had political power, they weren't doing anything. So Harb made a move, and he succeeded in taking over all of the positions, remember the 5 positions, except for the Siqaya. The Siqaya stayed with the Banu Hashim, and it was his uncle of the Prophet, Al-Abbas. He took control of the Zamzam area for the Banu Hashim. But the Umayyad clan at that point, they became the dominant political power in Mecca. Okay, and this is important as a background. You will see the role of Abu Sufyan and the role of the Meccans and whatnot in terms of the struggle for power that went on from the early days. Okay, so keep this in mind, those of you who are students of history who want to see why things have happened like they've happened in Islamic history and where we are going. And it is eventually that we are waiting for a person to come from the family of the Prophet ﷺ, Hashimi. His name is Muhammad, his father's name is Abdullah, his mother's name is Amina. He has a high forehead and a very hawk type of nose, high bridge nose. He will fill the earth with justice when it is filled with oppression. He is known as the Mahdi. And we are expecting him to come. And again, he's Hashimi. And he's going to carry some of that charisma. Okay? But remember what the qualifications are and who the person is. Right? So if a person comes in Toronto and says he's the Mahdi, right, run the other way, right? Because we have a lot of false Mahdis who are there. So I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.